It is the nation's party, period.
It's kind of a big media circle jerk.
It's almost the worst of human nature.
No one ever said that dinner was supposed to be dignified.
Stop talking for just a moment. It's incredibly rude.
Even stars want to be part of it.
Who's your favorite White House correspondent?
I don't think any president likes it.
They all hate the dinner.
It's kind of a wild ride.
That was a preview of the new documentary raising some eyebrows in Washington, Nerd Prom, Inside Washington's Wildest Week. It takes a look inside the excitement and the build-up to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which in the last decade has drawn just as many Hollywood stars as politicians and journalists. Joining me now, the director and producer of Nerd Prom, Patrick Gavin. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, so I really enjoyed watching this film. Party is it's turned into something that it never was intended to be, right?
Right. I mean, obviously, it's technically just a dinner, but the reality is that for anybody in Washington, especially if you're a journalist or you're a lobbyist or you're a business person, it's now almost a full week of parties and events. There's basically about 24 of them. In a lot of ways, the city can really shut down and just become almost unlivable unless you're actually going to these events itself. You know, and more importantly to me, the reason why I wanted to do this film was when you sort of looked at the year writ large and took a 30,000-foot view of what goes on in this town every year, this is our Super Bowl. It is the biggest event every year, both in terms of size and scope, but also in terms of the amount of energy and money and focus and ego that goes into it. And I don't think people outside of Washington know that. They might know of the dinner, they might see the president tell some jokes, but I don't know that they know about this sort of otherworldly status that it's taken on in a capital that's probably not supposed to stand for a lot of things that this weekend stands for. Yeah,
and so describe your journey here. You were a reporter for Politico. You actually covered the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You would go. You have some clips of yourself in the film where you're asking kind of funny, you know, lightweight questions to Hollywood celebs. Did you just decide you didn't want to do this anymore and you wanted to take a more serious look at the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Tell us about the journey you took as a professional.
Right. I mean, it's probably a combination of both. I mean, I did sort of. I think most people. It's kind of a young person's game when you cover that dinner, or even kind of when you do, you know, Washington society stuff. Anyway, you do it when you're younger, and you kind of get exhausted once you get married and have kids and all that. But also, I just also realized that there was, you know, a much better story to be told. I know when I was at Politico and even at Fishbowl, D.C. or the Washington Examiner, and these aren't indictments of those places. I think it'd be the same anywhere. I wasn't asked, you know, when I went out to cover that weekend, I wasn't asked to ask very probing questions. I mean, I still have a list of questions one of my editors gave me, I think in 2011, and you know, it was questions like, if you run into Scarlett Johansson, ask her what it was like to be on Air Force One. If you run into Kerry Washington, ask her about Michelle Obama's fitness. You know, they weren't very probing questions, and so I wasn't asking them, and so I take certainly responsibility for that, but I also wasn't being asked to ask them. There wasn't a lot of interest because, you know, for news organizations, Politico being one of them, I don't know if they want you to ask tough questions of other news organizations because places like Politico throw their own parties, and they may not have wanted to have a spotlight shined on that. So, you know, news organizations are in this really tough position that weekend, I think.
Well, you make a very funny reference to the fact that how hard it was for you to get into some of these parties once you became kind of a more critical journalist as opposed to a society reporter. And that is something that strikes me about this dinner, too. I've been to many of them, and it used to be that you could just kind of wander into all the little pre-parties before the dinners, and now there's a person standing out in front of all these rooms with a clipboard, and if you're not on the list, you don't get into the party, and it's all very elitist, and it's all very much, you know, you end up feeling badly about yourself because you didn't get invited to as many parties as some other journalists that you might know. I mean, it's kind of turned on itself in a way, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, that's just security being ramped up, but also it's because, as you said, I mean, I remember when I came to Washington 2003, it was very clear that if you just threw on a tie, you could walk anywhere you wanted in the Washington Hilton, and that's true. And so I think word got out, so they sort of shut it down. You know, but I think what was troubling for me, I mean, I can't, if somebody doesn't want me at their party, they don't want me at their party. I'm not going to begrudge them that. Obviously, people who throw these parties can't allow every single person in. But as you noted, I mean, especially at the dinner and probably at a lot of the parties as well, sometimes White House correspondents themselves don't get in. Certainly White House photographers don't get into a lot of these places. As I note in the film, the scholarship winners at the dinner themselves have a hard time getting invited to some of the related dinners around town. You know, for me, the only real troubling thing, if Google didn't want me at the party, they don't want me at the party. It was, though, I think, frustrating that if this week is supposed to be about Access, and certainly the dinner itself thrown by the association, which really does do a lot of good work on behalf of Access. You know, no one had ever done a documentary about this week and about that dinner before, and I asked to, and the association said no. And I do think that's an accommodation that they could have made and would have supported their general theory about Access. But that one was declined. And that's probably the only one that I would say, you know, that one seemed a little bit unfair, just because Access is really what you guys fight for 364 days of the year.
So tell us how viewers can watch your film.
They can head to our website, nerdpromthemovie.com. You can find all the information there, both how to watch it, where we'll screen it around the country, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff.
But anybody who wants to watch it can just go online and there it is, right?
There it is, yep.
Excellent. Patrick, Gavin, thank you so much for joining us. It's a great film. I hope we get a lot of folks watching.